Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this Game video, we're going to be discussing and analysing tech news which, as usual, has popped up over the past 24 or so hours. And over those 24 or so hours, there has been a major controversy with Intel. So, as many of you are aware, Intel have formally announced the 9th generation of processors. This includes a new set of HEDT systems with a Skylake refresh, the new Xeon Bleeding Edge HEDT processor, which features 28 cores and so on. But perhaps the most interesting set of processors for gamers anyway are the 9900K, the 9700K, and so on. With the 9900K, it does feature 8 cores, 16 threads, and we've been through the specifications several hundred times now, so there's not much point in retreading old ground. But ahead of the reviewers' embargo, which is the 19th of this month, well, Intel have commissioned a report which details the performance, and we'll go into the numbers in just a moment, I promise, of the 9900K along with other Intel processors against AMD. Now, this report is primarily focused at gamers, and by primarily focused, it is only focused on gaming. It aims to settle a dispute that hasn't even been resolved by reviewers yet. Is Intel's 9th generation of processors the best for gaming? Now, before we get into the numbers, I do want to say that I actually come across the PDF for this late last night, Seattle time. As regular viewers know, I am actually in Seattle right now, and I'm staying with a friend. So I actually found this PDF while she was busy taking care of her dogs. I actually found this PDF online. It was quite late though, it was around 8 o'clock PM, so I just did not have time to cover it. So I woke up this morning and, well, here we are, I'm recording early in the US. So apologies for not getting around to this sooner, but, you know, I'm staying with someone, so I can't really be filming at 9 PM in their apartment, as that's just unfair to them. If I was in the UK, well, it probably still wouldn't have aligned time-wise anyway. So it is what it is. But anyway, getting back to the performance numbers then, I do believe that Intel will be the best processor for gaming because, well, that makes sense. But the numbers, when you actually look through them, they do look highly suspicious. Fortunately, one of the things that the company in question, which is Principled Technologies, and yes, the name of the company is somewhat ironic, did, you know, disclose that it was paid for by Intel. I'll also link the PDF in the description of this video because, well, that's fair. But they also went through some of their testing methodologies, and there were several things which raised an eyebrow. Excuse me. The first is that they were using a GTX 1080 Ti. That's fair enough. Yes, the results may have be slightly different if they use a 20 series card, like the 2080 Ti or Ti or whatever you want to call it, but essentially it acts as a nice comparison. They were also using 1080p, which is also fair enough for showing the differences in CPUs. I would argue if you're using a 1080 Ti, there's very likely that you're probably not going to be using a 1080p setting unless you're running a really high refresh rate monitor, and gaming is, you know, something that is incredibly important to you with ultra high frame rates, but generally most people with a 1080 Ti or above are going to be running at 1440p. But again, for the sake of CPU testing, 1080p is fine, but there are still a few issues. They did run through the actual, well, settings of the games, and aside from the resolution, you'll notice that most of the games being run were not at the highest graphical presets. So immediately you're putting less load onto the GPU. To me though, the biggest culprit and the head scratcher for me was memory. Now, to their credit, they were using fast memory for AMD's Ryzen processor, the 2700X, along with other CPUs. They were not just conducting tests of the 9900K versus the 2700X. There are a myriad of other CPUs, including Threadripper and so on here. So I will give them credit for that. 2933 MHz is fine, they used XMP. The problem is that the actual memory timings were very, very, very loose. And as a lot of folks might know, memory clock speed is important because obviously that's bandwidth, but latency does have a big impact in gaming. And this was not the same for the Intel system. Not only did they set the clock speeds for the memory high, like the AMD Ryzen system, but they also tweaked this performance of the actual latency as well. In terms of the rest of the specifications of the system though, it's not like they had a GTX 960 in the Ryzen system and a 1080 Ti in the Intel system, so that's fair enough. But if you look at the apples to apples comparisons of the system, there were definitely a few things there that rose an eyebrow for me. But the actual performance numbers, there are websites, including PC Games N, which are reporting an up to 50% difference in performance between the 9900K and Ryzen, which is just not something you're going to see in real life. Now, that's not to say that if you were to run the actual settings at the lowest quality settings and so on, you probably would notice a difference. But the reality of the matter is that if you have comparable memory settings and all the other bits and pieces, that's not going to be the case. I actually have a set of performance numbers as well from Intel. This is actually kind of lucky, but a month or so ago, I did release a CPU core scaling video. That pretty much does what it says on the tin. We actually were being lent an MSI B360 motherboard, and we were also lent an i7-8700 processor. So I took it upon myself to actually do some core testing, core count scale testing with that processor. You can find that linked in the video description, but there are some results here as well. We've also done some testing with a 2700X and a B450, so we're going to use some numbers there as well, but we're also going to look at the performance numbers that we have from this paid study. Let's go for Gears of War, because this one is near and dear to my heart. So the 9900K is getting almost 200 FPS. The 2700X, meanwhile, is achieving 128 FPS. Now, that's not that great. That is actually quite low. Switching to Ashes of the Singularity, in their specific range of testing, the 9900K scores 57.3 FPS, which is within what you would expect given the quality settings. With the settings that we usually test with Ashes of the Singularity, the i7-8700 does achieve 52 FPS, but the 2700X, we score 47.9 FPS, and they achieve just a rather paltry 38.3 FPS, so that's almost 50% lower. Do I feel then that Intel are being dishonest with these results? Well, there's a couple of issues I have. The first is that they are releasing them way before reviewers get a chance. So obviously they're hoping that these will circulate amongst gamers and people will put in pre-orders. The second issue I have is that in reality, you're probably not going to notice anywhere close to the performance differences, because if you were to take the advantages that Intel system has, like the RAM timing and so on, out of the equation, but primarily if you were to focus on the fact that the settings are not exactly what you would be running in real-world gaming, particularly for most folks. I mean, yes, Counter-Strike, you could argue high frame rates are going to be great. You could also argue the same for other games as well, which rely on Twitch-based reactions, but Rise of the Tomb Raider, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Mordor, and so on and so on. Do you really need that high of a frame rate? The answer is probably no. You're going to crank up the graphical settings anyway. And even with a GPU such as an RTX 20 series GPU, let's even say you've got the Ti, the 2080 Ti, you're going to be running into GPU bound situations. Now, of course, as a reviewer, you do strive to put the CPU or whatever component you're testing to the highest amount of strain possible. So that's fine, but I just want you to bear this in mind. And finally, the pricing as well. The 2700X is considerably cheaper. That isn't to say that I'm advising you that rush out, buy a 2700X in place of the 9900K. The 9900K is clearly going to have a frame rate advantage over AMD. We know this. But is it going to be close to the 50% or the worst case scenarios we're seeing in these reports? No. If you do have the cash and you do want the best gaming performance possible, then most likely the 9900K is going to give you that result. And if you're desperate to upgrade your system and you've been really waiting for the 9900K or another processor to be released, and you're happy to spend the extra, then go for it. But if you're not desperate to upgrade your processor, let's say you've got a 1700X or you've got, let's say, an 8700K, I would probably say you're not going to be that blown away by the difference in this CPU. And I'd rather you get a new monitor or a new GPU if you're on a budget. Of course, we will be doing a full review of these CPUs when they are released, and then we can give you much more information right now. But my personal opinion, don't pre-order these CPUs based upon these numbers. That's my takeaway to you. Of course, you can do whatever you would like because it's your cash. But I just wanted to tackle this situation because I've already had 3 or 4 people message me, so here we are. Now that I have your attention, there is a critical piece of news I need you to sit down for. Seriously, it's going to be so shocking to you that you might not be able to find your feet supporting your weight after I tell you this. Ready? Okay, if you're not sitting down, I have warned you, so I don't want you to be, upset in the comments. But Sony have admitted they're working on a PlayStation 5. And the Sony boss has actually confirmed this to the Financial Times, and they've gone on record. This is not surprising. Everyone knows that Sony are working on the PlayStation 5. Microsoft actually said, of course, about Project Scarlet at E3, and I'm going to go more into some Microsoft news in just a moment. But in terms of Sony, they have finally confirmed it. What is also rather interesting, though, is that there is another set of rumours that are flying around. According to sources at Financial Times, the PlayStation 5 is, quote, and early indications were that there's not much of a major departure from the PS4 and that the fundamental architecture would be similar. For those unfamiliar with the news of the PlayStation 5, it is very much what you might expect. It is an evolution of the x86 architecture with a GPU from AMD. From the reports, it's going to feature a Zen CPU. We're not quite sure of the generation. Some rumours peg it to be a Zen 2, others tell us it's going to be a Zen Plus. As for the GPU side of things, it's almost certainly going to be Navi. There are multiple reports to tell us that this is going to be the case. In terms of raw performance then, this console will obviously be a considerable step up from the PS4 Pro, but it shouldn't be that big of a deal in terms of backwards compatibility. Moving on to the Microsoft side of the equation though, the company have formally announced Project Xcloud, and it does what you would expect given the name. It allows game streaming over the cloud network that is Azure. Microsoft are currently aiming this project to focus on things such as smartphones, but one does wonder if this is also going to be part of Scarlet. Don't forget that the rumours are that we're going to see a myriad of different consoles with Project Scarlet. Well, actually, by rumours, Phil Spencer himself has said that it's going to be a family of devices. He hasn't really given a number, so it's possible that we could have an ultra-thin type of device, almost like Google Chromecast, or perhaps a little bigger, which would maybe have wireless controllers, and you simply plonk that into a HDMI port. You would spend X amount of cash a month, and you would be able to stream games over the internet. Then there might be a local console, so think of that as an evolution to the Xbox One X. It would be, of course, considerably more powerful, and it would allow games to be played locally. Another distinct possibility is a handheld type of device. What that looks like and whether it will be able to play games locally or whether that's going to be purely streaming or a combination of both is unknown yet. This is all theory in terms of the handheld device. In fact, it's possible that the handheld device could simply be the streaming device and they are one and the same, a little bit like the Switch. The reason that that is starting to gain a little momentum, and the reason I think that it could be a possible route that Microsoft are going down, is because Nintendo a couple of times have said that they feel that there is going to be more competition for this type of device, and That's one of the reasons, allegedly anyway, Nintendo are going to release a more powerful version of the Switch, along with, of course, the obvious other stuff, such as being able to port games from the next generation of devices, in other words, the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox, just like Nintendo currently allow you to play ports of games like Doom, Wolfenstein, and so on. They don't want that to be going away anytime soon. It's going to be a weird generation, because at least in theory, it's possible that this is going to be the last generation of actual local computing consoles. To clarify, I mean by that in the future it's possible that game streaming could replace the actual local systems that we're used to. And I don't necessarily know how I feel about that. I want your opinions on this one, because I kind of go backwards and forwards. I guess I just like the local side of computing, and I think it's just ingrained in me. I mean, I've been playing console games for a long time. I started when I was ridiculously young, with very old consoles. I was given some old systems by my parents from their friends, and I just kind of have been gaming since I was just a couple of years old. So for me, it's just so normal to me to be able to plonk in a cartridge or a DVD or a CD or a Blu-ray or what have you and play games locally. I guess though, as internet gets faster, there's going to be less than the latency argument, but there's just something really awesome about the own game collection. Although I also know that that's being somewhat silly, because I have Steam on my PC and I'm a PC gamer. And if you were to look at my physical collection of games, they're pretty crap in terms of my PC. It's not like I own a physical copy of Shadow of the Tomb Raider or Gears of War or what have you. And even if I were to own a physical copy of those, DRM says, hello there, we're DRM and we stop you from doing that stuff. It's not like it was in like the 90s, where if you owned a copy of Half-Life and you plonked into your PC and then you typed in the code, it would activate. And yes, you might need the CD in there, but generally speaking, it was, you could play the game. It's sure it might require a patch to get rid of some of the bugs and whatever, but it's not like today where games are huge, and even if you did own the CD or the DVD, it would still be most likely something silly like just a CD copy of Steam, and then you would need to download Steam and it would give you a key, and then that would download the entire thing, and I've had several games which do that. It's going to be interesting to see how consoles work like this, and I guess one of the reasons that console manufacturers might be somewhat hesitant is because it's a lot easier to set up a cloud computing network, at least compared to the price of launching a console. So it would mean that companies such as Electronic Arts and Ubisoft and, well, just about everyone could start getting in on the act, and it might mean that we start getting some really weird situations where if you own a Sony streaming device, well, great, you get Konami, you get Capcom, but you don't get Namco. So if you want Namco, you have to go with Microsoft streaming device. But Microsoft streaming does not have, games from this particular generation. But don't worry, if you go with Capcom's streaming device, you get all of those things, and you also get some games from this particular manufacturer. It could be kind of weird. With all of that said, hopefully you have enjoyed the video. If you have, you know what to do. You can like and share and comment on the video to tell us what you think of today's stories. I especially want to know what you think about the Intel situation and your opinions thus far. Are you planning to buy these processors? Have you already put your pre-order down? Are you happy with what you've got? I'd also like to remind you that there's an Amazon affiliate link and a Patreon. Don't feel you have to use them, but if you do want to help the channel out, if you want to buy something on Amazon, that does give us a few pennies. But for now, I'm going to let you all go. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.